everybody, and welcome back to the THO Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett, Campbell, Ferguson. So glad you decided to join me today for our review of Portland-raised filmmaker Todd Field's Tar. He did indeed come from our own great city, and help me review the film. Jim Newman is here. Jim, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. I didn't know that he was from here. He is relatively new to filmmaking. That is, I guess this is only his third film. So
yeah, I mean,
he's a newbie in a way.
He was a bat boy for the Portland Mavericks. So
is that right?
Way back, and then he had these two films, In the Bedroom, Little Children. Then he vanishes, works on all these projects that never come to fruition, and including Jonathan Franzen adaptation, and now here he is over a decade later.
Well, I think your knowledge about him will be helpful as we dive into this, because I wonder somewhat about his personality from the way this film was constructed and what he chose to put in and what he really left out too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very interesting to me, and I had heard that, this film is, very different from what he's done previously. It kind of is and isn't, in my opinion, but we can get into that later. We saw this movie almost a little under a week ago now. I think we both came out of the theater, and I know at least I felt like I couldn't form a coherent sentence. Like the movie just, it just overwhelmed me to the point where, like, in that moment, I don't know if I could have, like, really honestly said if I loved it, if I hated it. I was just kind of stupefied by it. Now that it's been a couple of days, what's your feeling about it now?
Well, that assessment about immediately following the film is something I share. I guess you could use the word overwhelmed. My reaction was, what? What is this? And now what keeps happening, and this happens on other films too, as I think about it, certain elements come to my mind and then I analyze them. In this case, I think if I had to summarize the movie for myself, I would say that it's intriguing. It's worth watching. I also think in some ways, and I'll be interested to see what you think of this, it feels to me like it's less than the sum of its parts in a way. I'm not sure that for me it coheres as a full-blown narrative for various reasons.
That's interesting because, there's the basic narrative about this, composer played by Cate Blanchett, basically in the world of the film, the foremost female conductor composer in the world, it seems. Yep. And the movie is about her fall from grace because of a Me Too type scandal. But it's a movie definitely that asks a lot of questions that it either doesn't want to answer deliberately or simply doesn't have answers to. I mean, when you're saying that maybe it's kind of less than the sum of its parts, is that what you're talking about? Like are you thinking about other elements of it?
No, it's as though, for example, here's a big example of that. Her wife, this is a lesbian couple. She is married to the first violinist from the Berlin orchestra very prestigious orchestra that she directs. And this woman apparently has had a nervous condition in the past and requires medication, some kind of calming medication. So Lydia Tarr, the Cate Blanchett character, picks up a prescription of this drug, but she's the one that gobbles it down. She doesn't give it to her wife. She uses it. So we have to assume there that the woman, that Cate Blanchett, the character, is a drug addict and severely troubled, but at no point in the movie, other than in the apex, the real pivotal scene towards the end of the movie, there's no evidence at all that she's impaired by what looks like, I mean, she pours the pills into her hand and then stuffs them in her mouth. That's a lot of medication, and she doesn't seem to alter her personality. Now, I don't know if somehow, as a director, Todd Field overlooked that. It troubled me, though.
That's interesting. I mean, this is a really long movie. It's over 2.5 hours now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's a testament to kind of, how much it tries to pack in there, that the scene you just described, I honestly have forgotten about it.
Right. And and that's the great thing about talking to someone about a movie, because you're going to remember stuff I don't remember, Well,
it's interesting. Like, I mean, I came out of the film and I'm gonna tell you an element of the film that I think my perspective has evolved on. And by the way, we're gonna spoil the ending of the film, because you can't.
It's inevitable. You got to do that.
Oh yeah, you really cannot like talk about a movie like this properly unless you talk about the ending. So I mean, the ending is, her fall from grace, ends with her, going to another country. She ends up conducting a live scoring of a screening of the scenes from the video game Monster Hunter, which I had to look up to find out that's what was on the screen at the end. And you have all these people in the audience dressed up as Monster Hunter characters.
Oh, okay, because I wondered. I did not know why everyone in the audience was in costume, and I thought it was some sort of metaphor. But you're telling me there was really a reason for that. Yes, I mean, it made sense, actually.
Totally, and it's a tricky thing, because, I've never played Monster Hunter. I had to look all this up to kind of figure out the context, and I take it that the idea is sort of that her comeuppance is, she's someone who is sort of the epitome of high culture, and she's cast down into the abyss of low culture with the nerds and the cosplayers. And as a nerd myself, who has who actually recently just went to the Oregon Symphony's live scoring of Return of the Jedi, I kind of felt sort of personally offended, oh, come on, you're saying that's this great punishment, come on, that's such a sort of snobbish perspective as a filmmaker. But thinking about it, I kind of got to thinking well, the movie's from Lydia Tarr's perspective, and to her mind that would be a kind of undignified fate, even though it wouldn't be to me. And once I had kind of worked out and set my sort of agenda aside, I was this is a really compelling movie. It it's a movie that makes me very uncomfortable for other reasons, far beyond that ending. But I almost admire the almost devilish spirit, it seems to kind of delight in sort of messing with you. You have this this character who, if you saw them in a real life headline, I think probably both of us would be oh yeah, that person deserves to lose their career. But the movie's kind of going, well, what if she was played by Cate Blanchett and was really charismatic and charming, even in her kind of, obnoxiousness? And it's almost like the movie's boxing you in, trying to make you care about someone you don't want to care about. Maybe, I don't know. What did you make of how the sort of the position it puts you in as a viewer.
Well, one commentary, and I think it just absolutely a fact, that this movie, as this commentary said, would not have been made if it weren't for Cate Blanchett signing on to it.
Yes.
The whole reason for it is her. I think it's interesting when you talk about her comeuppance, which is, oh my God, she has to score a video game, wow, man, that's the end of the road. She's pretty plucky there at the end, actually.
That's true.
But she disses a real life person, now passed on, Jerry Goldsmith, who won an Academy Award for his scoring of the movie The Omen. And I don't remember what she says, but she puts him down as a less than person. And of course, what she's doing implicitly is comparing him to her as being far superior, because she is an artist. She has not, or she's risen above crass commercialism to real art. That's the takeaway of a lot of the movie. But, we get into this idea of scandal because this woman apparently has used her position to seduce at least one young woman, and then that woman's emotional balance was completely disrupted to the point where she committed suicide. But we never see that woman. We never see, in fact, any romantic entanglement between Cate Blanchett and this other young woman. And so I think it's an open question whether it really happened. It might be, yes, it might be, as the Cate Blanchett character claims, that the woman was crazy from the get-go. And we don't really know. I mean, as a member of the audience, I would prefer to know more about the main character. I mean, was she really that evil sleazeball that she might be, that it looks like she is? I think inherently or implicitly, and I would love to ask Todd Field this, are the people in the audience meant to believe that she is, in fact, an immoral user of other people because of her position? Or was she maybe a difficult person about whom it's easy to believe that she might do these things, but there's no proof, and let's give her the benefit of the doubt? I don't think that Todd Field expected that we were to give her the benefit of the doubt. I think we're supposed to think she deserves everything she gets. I don't know. What do you think of that?
That's a really interesting way of looking at it, because I mean, first of all, I think you're right. Like, even though Lydia Tarr does not behave like an innocent person, she's like, deleting lots of emails, presumably to kind of cover her tracks. But then at the same time, we don't actually see like any of the things she's accused of. So there's that ambiguity to kind of keep us on unsteady ground almost, and not get too comfortable with, oh, she deserved it, oh, she didn't. But the thing I think is interesting is, like, in this vein, I can't stop thinking about this film in connection with Whiplash, which is also about a monstrous conductor. And indeed, a subplot of Whiplash was one of J.K. Simmons's former students committed suicide, and maybe
right, Miles Teller, or at least he's in that movie.
Right, yeah, and the idea that, like, oh, is the Miles Teller character, is he going to, will he one day be so destroyed by this guy that he kills himself too?
Right,
and it seems like movies like Whiplash, movies like Tar, and I think it's it's hard to say, whether this is a bad thing, but it could be. They're so kind of like in the thrall of these monstrous figures, like they kind of love them in a way. They're kind of transfixed by them, and there's a kind of majesticness to them. I mean, when Lydia Tarr is conducting, it's absolutely mesmerizing. I mean,
yes,
Cate Blanchett on screen, like with her blonde hair, fling as she waves her arms about. Amazing.
Absolutely true. Absolutely.
And I guess it's a question of like, is there something valuable in kind of, going to the dark side and sort of, like appreciating, some part of the power that these figures have, or is it like a little bit messed up that the movies, kind of on the surface seem to decry them, and yet like on some level, glorify them a little bit because they're kind of entranced by them, and they seem to want us to be entranced because, like you said, in both films, the student that kills themselves is someone who's off screen. We don't get to know them. The movies are fascinated by power and cruelty, and there's a little bit of like, you can almost like feel the directors like licking their lips, like like exciting, dangerous,
Yeah, and my question to you here is, what do you think about that? Is it an imperfection of the movie that we don't really have a nuts and bolts reason to disdain Lydia Tarr because we know for sure she's been a very bad person? Is that an imperfection in the movie, or is it art somehow? I mean, is there a plus in not seeing that person?
Yeah.
What would you think? I mean, my gut is no. I think it's an oversight almost that we don't. I want to know you pay the money, you go and you want to watch something happen to someone that you know about, so you can leave the theater and say, she got what she deserved, or she didn't. I mean, she's innocent. What do you think of that?
I think that's a great question, and I wish I had a straight answer to it. I think there are a lot of ways to look at it. You could look at the movie as an equivocation, which I think is fair.
Mm-hmm.
You could look at it as a movie that is, deliberately, kind of like screwing with the audience and kind of trying to put us on unsteady moral ground. I think, like, my personal take is that on a sort of moral level, I think it's a little bit irresponsible of the movie not to be more clear. Because I think that makes the film like a little bit of a little bit of a game, like, like as much as a story. And, it's very dangerous to put your film in that territory. On the other hand, like I like there's a part of me, even though this isn't something I usually like, that admires the sort of twistedness of the movie, like the idea that it just, if I don't know, the delight that like Todd Field seems to be taking and kind of, jerking around our sympathies and giving us like so much evidence that this is a bad person, and yet at the same time, like during maybe the best scene in the movie, when Cate Blanchett is kind of at her lowest point, and she's sort of like walking around her apartment playing the accordion and singing this horrible caterwauling made up song, "Apartment for Sale," and it's just
she gets
you
into
almost
that
can't
position.
help but love her in that moment.
Well, it turns out, and this was confusing, while we were watching the movie, I almost wanted to nudge you and say, does she live in two different apartments? Because she has this luxury abode and she lives there with her wife and daughter. And I mean, it's beautiful. You had the sense that it must be a multi million penthouse that she lived in Berlin. It's beautiful. On the other hand, sometimes she wakes up in some lower middle class place that kind of is sordid in its shabbiness, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't understand what that was about till towards the end of the movie.
Right.
That her wife says, "Oh, you never give up our original place." You know, it's like it's still there, and so I mean, I don't understand why that's in there, and it was like, honestly, if you're watching a movie seriously and you are trying to take it in and understand the context of a person's life, Todd Field deliberately, I guess, messes with your understanding of something pretty primary to who Lydia Tarr is, which is where she actually lives, you know? I mean, just odd to me.
I'm glad you brought that up because that, like, I too was kind of confused by what was going on there.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, basically, as far as we understand, she has, you know, her, you know, fancy pants home where she lives with her wife and her child.
Yeah.
And then, you know, she has this other apartment where it seems like it's almost like kind of a separate office from her office at work in a way. And the sort of, you know, young cellist who she appears to be grooming, essentially, the apartment is where she's like taking her for rehearsals, right?
Yes, I forgot that little detail. It could be, although we don't see any passion necessarily between her, she has selected out a young cellist as a potential star with the orchestra. And I guess one is meant to believe that young woman, very attractive young woman, is getting that role because Lydia Tarr is wildly attracted to her and wants her in the vicinity so she can seduce her. On the other hand, it might be that she really is the best cellist, and therefore deserves the role. And you never know the answer to that. So again, is the Cate Blanchett character a bad person or not? I don't know.
I mean, for one thing, you know, this character, we hear her play. She actually is a very good cellist.
Yes.
You know,
yeah. And it's actually that actress actually is playing. You know that, right?
Yes, right, yeah. Right. I just learned that the other day.
Cower.
Yeah, amazing.
Sophie, I guess that's how you say her name. Sophie Cower, young woman, beautiful cellist. Okay, actress, but a beautiful, beautiful cellist. Really.
I wonder, you know, I mean, talking about this relationship between mentor and protege, that it seems like if not for Lydia Tarr's life falling apart, probably would have, you know, gone into inappropriate territory. Like in the middle of rehearsal, she is like stroking this young woman's face in front of everybody, and you know, clearly like lines are either crossed or on the verge of being crossed. But like, I wonder, and maybe this is kind of neither here nor there, but I mean, the choice, you know, of Lydia Tarr as the main character in this story, you know, specifically to, you know, make her a very like kind of, you know, glamorous, attractive gay woman, which I mean, to be totally frank, honestly, is automatically going to endear her to any like heterosexual men in the audience. You know, is that? Do you think like her sexual identity is that a piece of the the point the film is trying to make, or a piece of like how it's kind of trying to sort of engender sympathy, because like this would not be a sympathetic character if it was like a grotesque sort of Harvey Weinstein type character in the lead role.
I think it might be as simple as simply an element of characterization. It's like decorating a Christmas tree. You got to give her some behavioral quirks to define her. And in this case, she's a lesbian. So yes, it can definitely engender sympathy. And it does enrich the character. And in a cliche way, maybe it allows for some of the audience to understand her power and her strength as a person. You talked about your favorite scene where in that shabby apartment, she's been told that by people who are going to sell that apartment that they don't want her to make any noise in her unit, which just massively offends her because that is her entire life, making a certain kind of beautiful noise. So she grabs an accordion and just makes a horrible scene out of that. But for me, my favorite scene is very early in the movie when she conducts a class, and there is a young man who has evidently, you don't really see it, but he's evidently conducted the class musicians in a piece that Lydia Tarr doesn't respect at all. She thinks it's an empty piece. And so she's trying to educate this young man to the reason she feels that, well, he's not having it. He's a BIPOC guy. That's Black, Indigenous, people of color person. And I think he's also gay. And he is absolutely adamant that musicians like Bach are nothing more than old white guys. And that drives Lydia Tarr up a wall. So it's a beautiful, beautiful scene, and it goes on forever. I love the dynamism of it, and I love that she sits down at the piano and she has this guy sit there with her, and she starts playing, and she's actually playing. I mean, whatever. Apparently she took piano lessons in order to do this part, but she plays Bach beautifully. While she's playing, she's explaining to him what is so beautiful about the music. And I'm in awe of that. It doesn't in any way convince this young man that she's right, but it's a great effort on her part. It's a great, as an actress, I mean, I'm absolutely in awe of Cate Blanchett's ability to pull off something so powerful as that. I mean, she is so in the moment and so certain of his belief in Bach's immortality, that she should be convincing the guy, but he won't have it. And so that relationship between student and teacher just explodes into name calling. He calls her a bitch, and she says, well, you're nothing but a robot, But I think when I say that the movie is less than the sum of its parts, I don't mean to say the movie isn't worth watching, because it is. And some of those parts, like that tutorial in a classroom, is just, in my view, magnificent. It really is.
Oh, I totally agree. And I'm so glad you brought that scene up, because it's very potent. It's very uncomfortable to watch, but it's also fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it is.
it jerks your sympathies, in all kinds of ways, because, of course, how can you not, feel for this young character who is being humiliated by the guitar in front of everybody?
Yeah.
What a horrible experience. And yet at the same time, when she's, as you said, rightly, beautifully playing Bach for him, and you're listening, and her explanation of why, Bach's work is still relevant, still has value, is in that moment very persuasive. I mean, I think it's one of those moments that is going to speak to anyone who loves movies, because, we have these kinds of conversations as movie fans all the time. Like, I was just listening to John Bleasdale's podcast the other day, and he was talking to Hannah Flint, and she said, well, I know Hitchcock's a genius, but I would rather not watch the movies of a guy who is so abusive, when there's so many other filmmakers I could be watching, which I totally get. That's a totally legitimate perspective, but it's always tricky when, like, you're invested in the person's work the way Lydia Tarr is invested in Bach. Like, she can't simply throw Bach away any more than I can throw my memories of, like, watching Hitchcock movies with my family growing up, and seeing North by Northwest for the first time, and being, like, wowed at the possibilities of what the moving image can do. Like,
because you were touched.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it becomes complicated when you're touched by the work of a person, who did bad things. But I think we all, end up, like, kind of having to sort of live with that complication, because, like, you can't, it's not like you can delete the impact a work of art had on your life, and probably everybody loves at least a couple things that are great and are made by a bad person, probably a lot of things in the case of Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it seems like the movie was trying to kind of, like, wade into all of that, and not necessarily, like, end that conversation, but at least like capture the uncomfortableness and the nuance of it, maybe.
Yeah, I think we ought to call up Todd Field and ask him, if he was open to hearing what might or might not be criticism. I mean, potential imperfections. I'd love to have him explain to us why he did what he did. There were several red herrings in the film too. Like, she wakes up in her luxury apartment a few times, and there are weird sounds, and she goes searching even into the refrigerator to try to find what these sounds are. That's never explained. And she's mailed a book with a eerie pattern, kind of a labyrinth or a mandala kind of pattern. And then one night she wakes up, and it's not kind of a cell phone sound, not a tone, but it's a clicking sound. And so she goes searching through the house and finds, for no reason at all, the metronome that's in a cupboard is working. And on the cover is that same mandala or labyrinth kind of pattern. And forget about it, because it doesn't pay off. Nothing ever happens about that. You're not ever given any explanation of what that means.
These patterns, the metronome kind of inexplicably in the cupboard, ticking away, and then other things that seem very strange, like she's jogging, and you hear sirens and screams. That it's hard to tell if those are real or if she's imagining them. She goes into this kind of weird basement, pursuing her.
That's a very weird scene. Yeah.
Very weird. There's this growling dog down there that kind of seems like the Grim from Harry Potter. I mean, did you get the feeling like at any point that she was losing her mind, that these were kind of like hallucinatory little touches to kind of show that, like, I don't know, maybe they're either like manifestations of her guilty conscience or she's just simply going crazy?
Well, maybe, but there's nothing in her performance to at all suggest imbalance. Actually, I think it's a pretty cold performance. I mean, it's to the letter effective. Her power as an actress and as a performer is unmatched. I mean, it's magnificent, really. But in terms of interpreting the character, if she's hallucinating these sounds, you have no reason to think that, because as a viewer, you in fact are hearing them as well. The mail service sends her a book with that same mysterious pattern, and she freaks out and stuffs the book into the garbage because it's evidently really there. So who sent that to her? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's an illusion if there really is a book there. And by the same token, I would buy she was going crazy if there was some cue.
Yes.
Either in the ritzy apartment where she looks in the cupboard and there's a metronome going. That shouldn't happen. Especially it's got that pattern. Who put that there? Okay. But we don't see her changing her behavior at any point in the movie, even when she goes into that basement, as you mentioned, and then comes out of the basement and trips and falls. That's all you see. But then she starts saying that she got beat up, and she is a mess. And there is no explanation of that conflict between what we, the viewer, see happen and what she claims happened. So what's the takeaway, really, from that kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a very I feel like in some ways, like, reality is being toyed with. Like, it almost feels like there's a more like kind of lurid, Black Swanish version of this movie that could have existed, where she was having like really kind of freaky imaginings. But I don't know. I mean, in Todd Field seemed like he wanted to like kind of do something more restrained, but have these little things that you know plant seeds of doubt about where her what kind of state her mind is in. I did want to talk about what you brought up, which is that she, in that basement scene, she falls flat on her face, she trips, her face is all bloody and mangled, and she starts telling everyone that she was attacked. She says to her orchestra, "You should see the other guy." And it's
right.
It's interesting, like how easily that lie comes to her. Like, this is not a movie about someone who is like some kind of like master of deception, who is like, I shall now pull the wool over everybody's eyes. Like, it feels like she almost like believes her own lies. Like when she says, "I was attacked," I mean, just the way Cate Blanchett says it sounds like she's like, the character has convinced herself that the more heroic narrative of, yes, I survived this, this brutal battle, that she's like internalized that somehow.
Yeah, but as a viewer, you're left with the question: was she lying? I mean,
sure, that's
did we
true.
just not see the rest of the scene where some thug found her lying on the basement floor.
Yeah.
And then beat her up. I mean, it's just like there's no way to know. And it feels like Hitchcock would never have let that happen. I don't think that he would have allowed a main character to be that ambiguous like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, that kind of ambiguity, I I mean, who knows when that kind of thing first sort of, crept into, cinema, but it certainly wasn't like, an old Hollywood value, and like
No,
someone like
look at
Hitchcock was all
Gaslight, a movie like Gaslight. You know what I mean? Where it's
sure,
like someone
right.
going insane. Oh, that's delectable, really. It's like you like to watch it happen because
Yes.
it's edifying. Oh my God, this can happen to a human being. We don't see that with her until that penultimate scene. And I'd like to have you describe what you think of that scene on the podium when it's her big night. What a coincidence that on her big night, everything falls apart. You're not really warned that that's going to happen. You don't see her decline at any point, and then suddenly it's just over for her.
Yeah. Well, it's so okay. So that's I will. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I should describe that scene and then I do want to talk about it because it's fascinating on many levels.
Yeah.
So basically, the whole movie has been building to her performance of Mahler's Fifth Symphony.
Yes.
And this is a performance, and I thought this was a great detail that apparently has been delayed by the pandemic. So the idea is that Lydia Tarr has emerged from the pandemic like the phoenix rising from the ashes. She will now complete her great request to like perform and record Mahler's great works, and so of course almost inevitably she's sacked from the Berlin Philharmonic before this performance, and the kind of dweeby colleague played by Mark Strong is conducting this performance instead of her. And so we get this scene where that just as the performance is beginning, Lydia, in full tuxedo and cummerbund, walks on stage, pushes Mark Strong out of the way, brutally knocks him to the ground, and just like kind of stands there with her baton like, I'm here, now the show really has begun. And it's a kind of like she like walks on stage with such conviction that you almost feel like, oh, everybody's going to go along with this. Like, I mean, Cate Blanchett is walking out in a tuxedo. Like, how can everyone not just sort of surrender to her mighty will? But instead, she gets dragged off stage. Basically,
yeah, she gets bum rushed out of the room.
Yes.
Like, oh my God.
And I read Anthony Lane's review of the movie in the New Yorker, and he quite liked the film, but the thing he was the most critical of was that scene. Like, he felt like it was out of character for Lydia to commit an act of like outright violence. And when he explained that in the review, it made sense the way he explained it. Actually, watching the film, I kind of felt like, I don't know. This is like watching a volcano, erupt. It feels like there's been a lot like sort of like simmering in her soul throughout the film, and the violence within like kind of explodes out, and it's kind of horrible, but it's also kind of funny. I don't know, but what are your impressions of that scene? Because it's a very striking moment.
She falls to the ground. She punches out Mark Strong, the actor. Well, the actor is Mark Strong. I don't know the name of that character, but none of that seems to be prepared for. You don't necessarily understand that ill-considered move to come out on stage like that, and then to be so uncoordinated as to fall down and then to resort to violence. It's like, no, she's a cold-hearted, tough gal, really, like at one point there's a young student at the elite school where her young daughter goes, who's apparently been bullying her daughter. And in this one startling scene, Lydia Tarr goes up to this 8 or 9-year-old girl and kneels down so she's at eye level with this person and says, if you ever bully my daughter again, I'm going to get you. And if you ever tell an adult, they won't believe you. And then she says, you got that? And then she walks away. Well, that's unbelievable. And she also describes herself to this young girl who's evidently been bullying her daughter. She says, hi, I'm her daughter's father, she says. Yes. So she identifies as a male, I guess. And
it's like she wants to be called Maestro instead of Maestra.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. So those are more decorations on the Christmas tree in a way. It's like they are idiosyncratic ways that she shows character, but they're somewhat crude if somehow the movie doesn't embody those traits. And correct me if you think I'm wrong about this, but I don't see that it gels really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point, and I am glad you brought up this scene because to me, this scene is very like emblematic of the way the movie, toys with the audience's sympathies and I think kind of intelligent ways. Like, especially when she says to this young girl, no one will believe you because I'm a grown up, and you think, oh my gosh. Did Lydia, is this something, it sounds like the kind of thing Lydia Tarr might say to her alleged victims. And it's very scary.
Right. That's actually true. Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I mean, when I think about, the kids, kids I had issues with in, school who were bullies with or whatever, if Cate Blanchett had come up to one of those kids and said, oh, if you pick on Ben again, I'm going to get you, I would have been like, fuck yeah. It's like it's the kind of the uncomfortable position of like, gosh, she seems like a really, dangerous person with a kind of, scary like mixture of egotism and a lack of empathy. And yet at the same time, like all these things that kind of like seem designed to get you on her side, and it's very interesting. It's like it's very like hard not to get like swept away in the sheer charisma, and especially because like Cate Blanchett is so good at that.
Yeah,
I mean, last time she won an Oscar, Blue Jasmine, that character was not a very nice person either, but you rooted for her because of the sheer power of Blanchett's presence, and I think arguably something similar happens here, although the Blue Jasmine character I think was much more, more pitiable, more of a victim, I would say.
Well, I would just, as a viewer, I would like more guideposts and less ambiguity about the character, I guess. It's, that's how it feels to me. That it felt like a lack, but on the other hand, am I glad I saw the movie? Absolutely. It was really wonderful to watch, and I loved the kind of bird's eye view of an orchestra. And, if you go to a symphony or something like that, they're all pretty far away from you. You can't
Yeah.
see them. You cannot see the instruments that closely. You don't hear the beautiful resonance of any given woodwind, for example. You know what I'm saying? But
Yes.
in this movie, you have the privilege of being on stage with the musicians. And I didn't realize how much I enjoyed that. I didn't know I would enjoy that so much. But it was it felt like a gift that the movie gives you because you can see all that, you know.
Well, that's really interesting. I think it's true because I mean, a big pet peeve of mine, like often in movies, is like when films are sort of stingy about actually showing how, you know, an artist does their job and what their craft is.
Yes.
And this film, to its credit, I think, is very specific. Like you sort of see and understand specific instructions she gives the musicians, like, you know, the horns at the beginning of the piece, like her saying like, oh, this needs to be more like an echo, or even like, you know, her, you know, talking about, you know, certain dynamics, you know, like, well, what's piano compared to pianissimo, or in these kind of things that are, they're sort of in the weeds, I think, in a
They
good
are.
way.
They are. And they have meaning anyway. And that is one thing that really does come across in this movie, that everything is significant that she says while she's on the podium. And all those musicians, talented as they are listening with open hearts because they really want to know what she's saying. And I guess in that way, it does confirm her talent, because otherwise you have to take it on faith that she is the greatest conductor of all time, or of this era, you know, which is, I think, one of the premises of the movie, that she is that great. But it's like, how do you know that? Because you can't really compare her to other people, not in real life, not like knowing Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa. You
Right.
know, it's not like that. You just don't know. But yeah, the musicians by her act, and therein her performance truly, when she's conducting, is, well, it, you know, there are a lot to justify the price of the ticket in that movie, I think. You know, whether or not it completely coheres is another thing, but yes, it's certainly a movie worth watching in my view.
You made the great point, Jim, too, that, you know, even at the end, and sort of, you know, at least to her mind, to Lydia Tarr's mind, reduced circumstances, she still kind of, you know, gets back into her groove, and is still, you know, working with a, you know, an attention to detail and passion, and I love that, you know, when she's you know, rehearsing with the musicians for what we find out is the Monster Hunter concert, you know, she starts by saying, let's talk about the composer's intent. You know, it's like Lydia Tarr is Lydia Tarr, like kind of you know, no matter where she goes, and it seems like, you know, she's always going to bring this sort of intellectual rigor. There's an article in Vulture, I thought, you know, put it quite well, where it said, wow, those Monster Hunter fans are in for one hell of a concert, you know, whatever this movie means. Like,
yeah, you know, and her pretension, I guess, if it is pretension, is sort of punctured in a scene, again, that kind of comes out of nowhere. She's back in her childhood home in her bedroom for a very brief while, and she's at the top of the stairs, and some grungy looking guy comes home, and he looks up and he sees her, and he says, oh, I mean, he's not glad to see her at all, and he says, hi, Linda. I mean, her name is not Lydia, it's Linda. But then she finds an old VHS, old technology, an old videotape of Lenny Bernstein explaining music to kids. And wow, I mean, Did Todd Field really think that we, at this point in the picture, needed that lecture? Because it goes on quite a while. Telling what music does. It's really a great way to communicate. Goes beyond language. Yeah. Okay. That's true, but I don't know why it's there, really.
That's an interesting, quirk of this movie that, some movies are long because they have a lot of plot or a lot of different characters. This movie's long because each individual scene is very long, and I think that worked best with the three scenes at the beginning: the interview, the talk with Mark Strong at the restaurant, and then the wonderful scene we were talking about where she has the conflict with that student. I suppose that as you get deeper into the film, maybe that the kind of very elongated scenes, maybe it seems to like work less well. I mean, when I think of like long scenes, to me, like the pinnacle right now is Drive My Car, where like you had conversations that seemed to go on for an eternity, and yet it's like, oh my god, like each one of these is almost like a beautiful movie in and of itself. Right, I want to listen to this dinner conversation forever. I want to listen to this like very vulnerable chat in the back of a car forever. I think by the third act of Tar, maybe as much as I admired the film, maybe my patience waned a little bit. It didn't have quite the same hold.
No, I'm with you on that. Not at all to say, and I guess I've said now a couple times. I really did like the movie. There are just odd choices throughout. I'm not sure that they don't undermine the movie. There is one curious element. It can't be more. Doesn't go on longer than a minute and a half. And I don't remember exactly in the movie where it is, but she's listening to NPR.
Oh, yes.
and she is listening to the announcer who gives the credits, like this portion brought to you by State Farm Insurance, whatever. That woman that actually does that announcing is very sing-songy in her delivery, and personally for me it drives me up a wall. If she's not reading it like a normal human being, she's going up and down and up and down. She doesn't know evidently how to do it better, but oddly, and I don't understand why it's in the movie other than I agree with the Cate Blanchett / Lydia Tarr character when she makes fun of that voice and sort of it's I don't understand why that is there. I don't understand. But it's like there are a lot of little, maybe they're nuances, maybe they show character, but it's just like how would someone, unless it was me, who's ultra sensitive, that kind of thing, be gratified or agree with Lydia Tarr that woman announcing on NPR should be made fun of? I mean, sure. What is that even about? I don't think it should be there. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's an odd thing, and this does bring up something that I don't know if I have a point to make about this, but this movie, I mean, it starts out with her being interviewed by the New Yorker's Adam Gopnik playing himself. Yeah. Lydia Tarr is listening to NPR. I have no clue if my parents would see this film. I have no idea if this is something that they would be at all interested in. But it is like it's funny, like the kind of connections to the New Yorker and to public radio. It almost like so much of the movie feels like, like, oh yeah, this is the kind of person who, like, I would be like reading a profile of them in a magazine, and then I'd be like, I'd be having a drink with my dad, and we'd be talking about, oh, did you read about Lydia Tarr? And
Mhm.
what a a fascinating, complex, damaged human being. And it's funny how there are these like trimmings and trappings, like very like, much designed to sort of like situate it in the quote unquote real world, and like even like talking about the pandemic, and yet at the same time it's not the real world. There is a certain like kind of like sheen or glamour to the movie, that makes it feel a little bit heightened, I guess.
I think really as a viewer, you're meant to feel privileged to be invited in to this world,
It's true,
you
yeah.
know. But oddly, and you kind of alluded to it, there are glancing references to the real world, such as that NPR announcer, or talking about Jerry Goldsmith. He actually was alive at one time. He did score movies. He won an Academy Award, and she's dissing him, and he's real, even though she's not. And so, is that meant to anchor the movie in some sense in reality? Then I mean, I don't know.
I don't know either, and this is probably neither here nor there, but I happen to be a very devout Jerry Goldsmith fan who has
Good for you.
as I learned to play one of his Star Trek pieces on the piano, the theme from First Contact, and I gotta say, like, when you sit like day after day trying to trying to, like, kind of like figure out the beautiful emotional story and the layers of a Jerry
Yes,
Goldsmith piece, you really
right.
understand why someone like Lydia Tarr should bow down and
Shut
respect him.
up.
God damn it!
Exactly. Hans Zimmer, man.
Oh
People like
yeah,
that. Yeah, you don't diss them. I mean,
it,
no,
it,
that's just funny.
yeah. Hans Zimmer, it's funny. Like, people, like, he's so ubiquitous, and to the point where people go like, oh, another Zimmer score, but even the I don't know, like, even the scores where you kind of, you don't expect much, like on the last Bond film, which was not a film I liked very much at all, but like I was like, God damn it, Hans Zimmer, found some energy and poignancy in that movie that wouldn't have been there otherwise. That's the power of
Oh,
composing.
dude, I mean, yeah, we really are going to get into the weeds now. But in a movie called K2 from a long, long time ago, this is the first time I ever really ran into Hans Zimmer. There is a scene, they're climbing the mountain, very difficult mountain, very dangerous mountain to climb, K2. There is probably a helicopter shot on a high slope with a terrible pitch and a fall line that means if you lose your balance, you're going to die. But there is this eerie, high pitched, rhythmic sound that keeps coming back. I don't know if it's meant to mimic a heartbeat or what it is, but I just got chills telling you this because even now it works so beautifully in capturing musically that moment, that it's magnificent. Now, that is really, I suppose, the brilliance of Lydia Tarr, that she's trying to bring out that magic in Mahler's work. So, but that's really in the weeds because, I mean, there's no discussion per se of music on that level. I mean, you get the politics of music and you understand that young woman that she promotes to a featured role in an Elgar piece playing the cello. You see how beautiful that music is and you see how skilled that cellist is. But the mechanics of exactly how one creates beauty maybe it would be pretty impossible, I guess, because it's such an abstraction. I mean, that's why people take courses in this stuff. In a 2.5 hour movie, I mean, that's a long movie, but it's not long enough to give you a sense of music appreciation if you don't already have it. And I don't think the movie's really about music appreciation, really, at all. Not really. I don't know exactly what it's about. As I say, it's less than the sum of its parts to me.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just listening to an interview where Todd Field said, well, this didn't have to be set in the world of music. It could, she could have been the head of a corporation,
Yeah.
could have told
Okay,
this in
sure.
any arena. And so
That's
I
true.
think you're right. I think one thing that people should take away from our conversation as far as music is that anyone who hasn't seen Dunkirk should watch it because it combines Hans Zimmer and Elgar. So,
wow, good for you that you know that. That is great. Yeah, that's probably a reason to rewatch it, man.
Yeah, well, and then also, I mean, again, I feel like I should hold some of this back in case we ever do a Hans Zimmer podcast. but I will say that I like what you were talking about the heartbeat. I love music that almost like doubles as sound effects.
Yeah.
And he's done that with like kind of like scores that sound like ticking clocks and the like. And yeah. I don't know. With Tar, I'd be interested to listen to the score again because I agree. I didn't really notice it much, I admit, but I know it's by Hildur Gudnadottir, the Oscar-winning cellist of Joker fame. So
cool that I didn't mention that score because I really didn't know how to say the name of that musician.
It's funny. I only learned from listening to NPR actually, because
say the name again. It's a woman.
Hildur Gudnadottir. I remember Terry Gross asking the director of Joker how to pronounce the composer's name properly, and
good. Okay.
That at least according to Todd Phillips, that's how you say it. So
all right. We haven't mentioned something that we did mention the night of that film, walking out. We mentioned that the movie started with the ending titles, and it really did do that.
Yes.
I mean, that endless listing of every animator, every driver, every
there's
sound.
A lot of credits at the end too.
Yeah, there were, but at least it wasn't as long as is typically the case. I like to watch. I like to see whether or not there were a lot of special effects a lot of times. So I'll sit there alone, and then I'll meet whoever I'm with in the lobby because they left.
Yeah.
But in this movie, everybody, if you want to watch this film, has to sit through what are, in effect, the end titles before anything else happens. They're there. And then you got that really long NPR-like interview with the art critic from the New Yorker, which, my God, it does go into the weeds. It's a serious damn interview. So that's how that movie starts. So I guess you are informed in that way that this, I don't know, is a serious movie. Is that what he's trying to say? Why do you think he did that? Why do you think he started with that long set of titles?
I don't know. I mean, like it almost seems like a kind of impish thing, like, haha, I'm gonna force you to sit through this crap to wait for the movie to start. But
I'm sick of people walking out before all these people get credited. Craft services people deserve to be honored too.
Right, yeah. I mean, I don't know, like I remember, seeing, the last film he did, Little Children, I think when I was a teenager, and not liking it very much at the time. I mean, my tastes have changed somewhat since then, so I don't know how I feel now. But at the time, I found it to be sort of a a kind of, like cold, distant movie that kind of delighted in poking and
Interesting.
prodding the audience, and so like I kind of see like with the credits, the endless credits at the beginning of Tar, like there's a little bit of a cackle there, but then also there's this interesting music that I don't know, like it almost sounds like it could be like from a chant from an indigenous culture, perhaps, like
Yes.
maybe sort of alluding to Lydia Tarr's education, or perhaps alluding to kind of where she ends up at the end. It's interesting.
Because yeah, for a while, in my memory anyway, and since you brought that up, I'm going to say this because I could easily be proved wrong, but that opened that movie so unique that I think between the long title sequence and the New Yorker interview at the Cooper Union or wherever it is, the screen goes to black
Right.
for a while, and you do hear this voice, which might be a chant, right? That's what you're
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
A very like
that
a woman's
eerie,
voice. Yeah.
yes, yeah. And I don't, maybe I missed it, but I don't think that was ever explained, really.
No. No, I don't think so. I mean, I know I said I thought Apartment for Sale was my favorite part, but the more I
Mm,
think about it, the more I think that the movie kind of peaks with the first three scenes. Like with
maybe,
the New
yeah.
Yorker interview is so interesting. It's kind of like, oh, this is the sort of polished image like Lydia presents to the public, and then the kind of like conversation with Mark Strong in the restaurant. That's the kind of the more like pragmatic Lydia behind closed doors, the maybe more like practical and cynical version of the character. And then finally the you get to that confrontation with that student, and it seems like you have the side the sort of all of her, that kind of the fullest expression of who she is, sort of the brilliance, the bullying, the sheer charisma. Like I can't think of another movie that like sort of so quickly right at the beginning, almost like in a three-act structure within the movie, kind of illustrates or attempts to illustrate who a person is. Like it's I don't know, it's an unusual approach. It's interesting.
Well, that that classroom scene where she debates with the young student um, the value of long dead genius composers. Um, I knew watching it. I thought it was really magnificent while I was watching it, and it went through my mind. And I know I mentioned it to you at the time, whether or not that was a one take shot. I mean, that's really in the weeds, and it probably makes no difference at all. But at a certain point, I started looking because it flowed. I mean,
Yes.
that scene flows beautifully. You utterly believe that you are there watching the debate with this young guy who is surprisingly not having any of what she's saying. He's
Yeah.
actually holding his own, and it only fires her up more. And then she'll go off on a tangent, but she'll come back to him. Oh, and say, oh my God, she has not forgotten what he said. And so she brings him back in, and then she has him come up and sit with her on the piano while she plays. And really, if it is one scene, it's the classic term tour de force. It's really, really, whether it's a composite of a number of takes or not, it's really not relevant, but it works so beautifully. It's just a really, it's almost worth the price of admission to me right there. So I agree with you. Yeah, the beginning of the movie really is a knockout. Really is.
It's interesting with like the kind of conversations around these movies where you do have like very long takes, and I feel like a lot of people, to my mind, unfairly sort of dismiss that as like kind of like a fad. To me, it's a way of like sort of turning back the clock, because it forces filmmakers, I think, to like immerse you in the film more and be more deliberate
Mm-hmm.
about their blocking, because you can't just sort of magically stitch everything together with a perfect cut. Like you have to plan
Oh,
things
you're
more
right.
thoughtfully, you know? And
That's yeah. And if it is a limited number of takes, or if it is one take, then the choreography of that scene is really stunning. The
yes.
way that camera somehow is in exactly the right place all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awe-inspiring to me, really.
It's interesting, like how, like on the one hand, this is a very small movie. I mean, it's basically mostly people talking in rooms. That's a reductive description, but I think it's fairly
It's
accurate.
true though. Yeah, it is true.
And yet, like somehow, like it's sort of mounted like this massive production. And I think about, like, there's a shot where she's in a car that's driving through a tunnel, and the camera's like very far back, like gliding after her car. And it kind of reminded me of like some of Terrence Malick's recent work, where he's like shooting cities in very like sort of epic, elegant ways. And it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of interesting, like how this movie is so small on the one hand, and yet feels to made to be so big. Like, I mean, it's funny because like the movie has written a book called Tar on Tar. This
Hmm.
almost feels like the movie she would make about herself to try and prove how important she is. Like,
Yeah, one thing we really haven't talked about are some of the betrayals. She has an assistant who's very
yes,
loyal to her, and this assistant has reason to believe that she might be promoted to assistant conductor at some point, because she knows that the old man who now occupies that position, and he doesn't know it, but he's on his way out. And so you get to watch a number of points at which there is a betrayal.
yeah,
Or maybe she's just, and here again, it's ambiguous. You don't know if, for the sake of art, she's getting rid of the old man who was the assistant conductor because he's old school and he doesn't know what he's talking about anymore. That might be. And the reason she doesn't promote her assistant to that position is because she's just not worthy. And then the other big betrayal that comes to mind is when the first cellist, who has every reason to believe that she will be playing the Elgar concerto or whatever it is told that she's not going to, because this young Russian protege is going to be in that role. Well, is that because Lydia Tarr wants to seduce the Russian woman, or is it because she's just a flat out better musician than the first cellist? It's like you watch these things happen, and and at least for me, I don't have the background or the knowledge to make any sort of judgment on any of that kind of stuff. So I'm left puzzled in a way about what really went on there in the politics of this movie.
there's so much that's kind of like either unresolved or out of reach. I mean, the
Yeah, it
young
is.
cellist who she, appears to be grooming, uh, actually nothing happens because her career is, destroyed before she can, make any really serious moves. Which it's, it almost like I mean, even that like seems like the movie is going like, oh, well, you thought you were gonna see something
Yeah.
salacious. No, we're just gonna leave you in the dark, which it seems like is so like that's the movie's answer, like in a lot of cases, really.
Well, and it also might suggest that Lydia Tarr is at the end of her shelf life because that young woman, whether she would have that predilection anyway, we don't really know. But they end up in New York together, and Lydia Tarr suggests dinner. And the young Russian woman said, I got plans. So, or not, I've got plans. I'm tired. I need to stay in my room. And then Lydia Tarr leaves her hotel room only to see this young woman leaving with some guy, I guess, on the elevator. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it. You are not you're not my preferred choice for a dinner partner, Lydia.
Well, it almost seems like an All About Eve kind of thing, that like no matter how high you rise, like the younger person is gonna rise up and will disappoint you and maybe even betray you, and once that person is the person in power, someone will disappoint and betray and usurp them. It's like this,
right? And you don't get to see that play either because
that's true.
She's a plucky woman, whatever else could be said. No matter, she has this disastrous fall from grace. I mean, that woman that I guess we're meant to assume that Lydia Tarr used in this cold-hearted, pernicious way so severely that the woman commits suicide.
Yeah.
And somehow the public gets wind of this and understands what happened. So there are street protests and great anger welling up. And Lydia Tarr ends up going to the Far East and scoring a video game. And that's as bad as it gets for her, though. It doesn't get any worse yet, anyway.
So maybe this is a ridiculous question of me to pose. Maybe I'm just being nitpicky, but the idea of street protests over a conductor of classical music. Do like superstars of classical music really command that kind of attention?
Well, I think deconstructing a movie, this is the risk that any artist faces, and Todd Field faces this. As you construct a narrative, are there giggle factors that you didn't see, or maybe were unjustified in criticizing the movie in these ways? I guess I don't want to pile on to the guy, but these are, and yours are as well. I mean, these are legitimate impressions that we're sharing here because it seemed this way to us.
Sure.
And it does seem that there are flaws in this movie, and that, as you say, that's one. Is like, would you really care if Herbert von Karajan slept with some woman, not his wife, and she killed herself at some point? I mean, would you really protest in the street and make signs and march and yell?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, if God forbid, I don't know, like Carlos Kalmar did something terrible, would people be like standing outside the Schnitz with the sandwich boards? Like, I don't. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, roughly. I'm with you. I'm guessing that probably won't happen.
Yeah. Well, one final question I did want to ask you. I mean, and this maybe is something we can get into more down the road, but as far as like the awards season goes, my impression of this movie is that Blanchett has a good shot at winning her third Oscar, but that overall this movie is probably too dark and weird and morally ambiguous for to win Best Picture from the organization that really not that long ago gave Green Book Best Picture. I don't know, what did you do, but what do you think, Jim? Do you think there's better awards prospects for this?
I do. I really do, because even though Cate Blanchett gives masterful performance, I mean, her energy level, just the charisma, really, and that's a word that's hard to define, but she registers that. She was paid millions of dollars, no doubt, to play that role, and she's worth it. She really is. But she doesn't have to show emotion beyond A to B or maybe C. There's not a gamut of emotion there. She is in every, and she's in virtually every scene in the movie, I guess. She doesn't change.
No.
Yeah, she falls down and punches out a guy in one scene, but other than that, she's the same person. Whereas, I saw The Woman King with Viola Davis, and that movie just radiates emotion, even though she has far fewer words to memorize. And that performance, Viola Davis's performance, just knocked me out. It was so good. I would love to see. I guess she's been nominated 3 times and never won an Oscar. I would.
Oh, she did win for.
She did win,
think, right?
I don't remember. Look, I'll defer to you. You're the expert. Did she? I thought that she had never won.
There were, but there were a lot of times. You're right, like where it felt like she was close to winning or should have won. Like, like when it was her versus Meryl Streep, and Meryl Streep won for The Iron Lady. I think that was the one where people were kind of like, oh,
yeah,
like, come on, like really Streep again,
Yeah. Yeah, I thought I read that she hadn't won, but that could be my brain playing tricks on me. But the ultimate takeaway that I mean to leave you with is that this time out, I mean, yeah, she often plays kind of a dour woman. I mean, wasn't she? Didn't she play Ma Rainey or somebody like that?
Didn't she and Chadwick Boseman do that movie together?
Yes, they did.
I know that was his last role, I think.
Right, and he was great, and he was, I believe, nominated for that.
Right.
And she didn't win, I guess, and that movie, while impressive, again, just to summarize, my takeaway so far is, in my opinion, Viola Davis ought to win for The Woman King, because I think, and the director of that movie assembled that movie masterfully. It's a great film, in my opinion. I know we're not talking about that movie, but in comparison to this one, The Woman King, for sure, for me.
Well, you've sold me. I haven't seen it yet, but I definitely want to see it after.
I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'd love to hear what you say.
Oh yeah. We'll have to talk about it. And also, by the way, I mean, anytime the Academy wants to give Viola Davis an Oscar, heck yeah. She deserves all the trophies as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the charisma, wow.
Yeah, and she's a 57-year-old woman, as I remember, and she is playing a warrior who still goes out and engages in hand-to-hand combat. And there's a poignance to that because she isn't a kid, and she's leading these young striplings. And by the way, the casting is just extravagantly great. I mean, the people who are the women warriors in this movie are beautiful human beings, right? But they're all young and lean and powerful. And here's this older woman who is just filled with heart and caring and belief in protecting her tribe. And I mean, it radiates out of Viola Davis. You get the whole premise of the movie by watching her face. Really, is that good?
I think too. I mean, I would like to see the Academy, acknowledge sort of like the art of action acting more.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, it's still insane to me that Charlize Theron was not nominated for Mad Max. Like,
Yeah.
I can't remember who else was nominated that year, but that's one of those things. It's like really, really, come on, like, I mean, I don't know. It feels like, and maybe this kind of ties into a bit of Tar, but there's a kind of in the Academy still maybe a kind of perhaps like a false like high culture, low culture,
Maybe. Yeah.
But I hope that the Woman King will overcome that because it's well reviewed and it happens to be a hit. And if you got both, I mean that helps a lot.
I think the machinery is there to honor her as she should be for that movie. I hope that's true because I mean I went with a friend and we were both elevated by it. I mean we left that theater happy. And I don't know that always happens. I just there was something about it. That film resonated. It filled a person with hope in a way, and I don't want to really analyze why. I mean, that's probably that's a different podcast probably, but yeah, it was a pleasure in my view. It was a pleasure to watch that movie.
Well, I do. I like what you brought up, so I do want to briefly speak to that. Like, I think it's like underrated, kind of the power of a movie to sort of like offer genuine hope.
Yeah.
Like I saw the Banshees of Inisherin, which there is the movie that I like a lot of things about it, but I definitely have some issues with it. And by the way, on Rotten Tomatoes, as of now, I am the only rotten review of that film. So
is that right? Interesting.
I am single-handedly responsible as we're recording this of taking it down from 100% to 99%.
But I say good for you on that because I read some of the summaries of reviews. I didn't read all the reviews, but on Rotten Tomatoes, I read summary reviews of Tar. And they all just seem to be in lockstep in a way.
Yes.
They didn't get below the surface, I felt. And it's a powerful performance again by Cate Blanchett,
Like that. I mean, I think, award season, there's a lot of lazy criticism out there. And I like Tar better than the Banshees of Inisherin, but in general, I have to say, I think, post-pandemic, I have a lot less patience for sort of sadistic movies that are just kind of like delighting in portraying how horrible life is. And, like, I feel like now, like if something can like give me like a cathartic experience and do it in a way that feels like genuine and not like sort of, forced in that kind of Spielbergian gold dust kind of way, if I can like get genuine hope out of a movie, like these days, like with the way the world is, I regard that as like perhaps, the worthiest mission a film can undertake.
Yeah, well, the performance in that, Brendan Gleeson, right, and Colin Farrell,
right,
are in that, and I know that they went through a lot of trouble. They shot on 2 different islands.
Oh, really?
To get the views they wanted. They actually built that pub.
That's crazy.
I know, that is just nuts because they wanted a certain view out the door of the ocean. so they went through a lot of trouble, but it is a very dark damn plot.
Yes.
I haven't seen the movie. I saw a making of which is on Apple Video right now, I guess.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
But
well,
they went through a lot of trouble.
It's no spoilers to say that severed fingers play a very important role.
I know. It's like, thank you so much for introducing that image into my brain.
Right, exactly.
Damn.
Oh man,
it's a hard one.
Well, I think that wraps up for today. I hope we'll be, get to talk about all these movies some more as awards season.
Yeah. As time goes on, you're right.
Yeah, but if you like this podcast, please give us a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or download if you're listening to us on Podbean. And I'm on Twitter at THO Bennett, and you can read all the great reviews and content we have at thomoviereviews.wordpress.com. I should ask you, Jim. I feel like I never asked these people, ask anyone this on the podcast. Do you have a social media or anything?
Not really. I had a blessed 36 episodes of my own podcast with this masterful partner I had. The premise of Inherently Human, which, by the way, I just had put on Amazon now, so it's on all or many podcast venues. It's called Inherently Human, and the premise was that it was a conversation between a 70-plus-year-old and a 20-year-old. I being the 70-plus-year-old person, but Aidan DeBoard is the individual that I did this podcast with, and really he was phenomenal. And I love. All we did was talk. We didn't prep. We didn't do anything, but it was, for me personally, magnificent to watch how we both were in such synchrony that we could just about finish the other person's sentence. And it was really, I mean, wonderful. So
that's awesome. I haven't listened to it yet. I want to listen to it now. So Inherently Human, you said?
Inherently Human, yeah. 70, and believe me, look, he's moved on, and that is fine. I keep telling that man could do great in radio, but for anyone who's Gen Z, radio is snake bit. I mean, people think even FM radio, forget it. So maybe rightly, I cannot judge that. I would have loved to have done far more than 36 episodes, but each one of them was a pleasure. And we toy with the idea. The last time I had dinner with him, we were saying, oh, maybe, but I don't press it because, that's a personal choice, whether you want to do something like that or not. I don't know. However, I've had other glimmers. Look, there are a lot of people who are quick enough, right? And verbal enough. And interesting enough that you could fill time having these conversations. They're a pleasure. Really are,
Oh, I agree. I mean, I don't think I would have survived the past 2 years without podcasting. Thank God for good conversations, man.
No, it's great. It focuses a person's energy in a way, maybe just because of the idea that other people are listening and you want to stay on topic. You know what I mean?
Yes. I know. Well, it's interesting because I often thought about like, gosh, should I ever start some sort of film discussion group, would that not serve the same function? And then I realized no, there's something about like actually creating something and sort of being forced to in a way almost perform a little bit. Like I feel like the discussion is perhaps richer that way.
I agree.
And that's why I was kind of like, oh man, I kind of want to stay the course and do things the way I've been doing them for what feels like an eternity now.
Yeah, it's almost a physical pleasure, bottom line.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect note to end on. anyone who's listening, thank you all so much for tuning in. From all of us here at THO Movie Reviews, happy movie watching.